Anyhow, well, thank you for joining me here. I really appreciate your time, and I know you're very busy, so that's awesome. So you're in Florida right now, or?
I am in Key West, Florida right now, working remotely. I absolutely love the ability to pick up and go and work from wherever I decide. Occasionally, I'll still fly up for hearings and stuff, but the pandemic has made things so much easier for litigants. They used to have to take a day off from work here, a day off from there, and now it's, a 15-minute conference, and then they go back to living their lives and,
Yeah,
doing their parenting responsibilities and all those things. So
yeah, that's nice. So we haven't talked about this yet, but I did hear that divorces kind of picked up after the pandemic. Is that true?
it
Or during?
immediately started picking up.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what on the front end, it was more like custody disputes because everyone was like, well, the kids are with me and there's, a stay put order. So what do we do with the kids? And then after they were stuck in the same house with their spouses for 2 weeks, which became 2 months, which became so on, so on.
Yeah.
Then the divorces started to happen and
Wow.
the domestic violence started to happen.
Mm,
And now we have post pandemic babies,
wow.
and it just has continued going and going.
Yeah, a lot of things changed. A lot of people retired, divorces, all kinds of crazy stuff, but now it feels normal to me. How about you? Is life feeling normal to you right now?
Very. And
Yeah,
honestly, okay, so normal is such like a weird term for me because if I think about what old normal was, like I never want to go back there.
yeah. I
Old
think a lot
normal
of
is
people
like
feel that way.
commuting 2 hours a day. Old normal was, 12-hour work days.
Right.
Old
Who
normal
knew
was
you didn't have to
definitely
work that
not
long in
working
an
from Key
office?
West. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you're primarily focused on helping folks that may be looking for advice with divorce in New Jersey specifically. Is that right?
Yes. So I'm only
Yeah.
licensed in New Jersey, but I always, can help people find a connection with someone in their area. Since I'm a
Mm,
member of the Amicable Divorce Network, that's nationwide, and they continue to expand. And we're the kind of like-minded people where we really don't want to have to pull out the boxing gloves unless and until it's time to start the fight. So many people get wrapped up in they think it has to be like it is on TV,
mm.
where everybody wants to take everything for everybody, and somebody wants to be on the curb while the other person's in a mansion. It just doesn't really happen that way. So I try to
Gotcha.
help people like keep their head about them and make sure that they're not just fighting for the sake of fighting.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, basically a contested divorce versus an amicable one, perhaps, maybe is the goal
Mhm.
kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's easier and
Like,
quicker.
yeah. Contested is like the last resort.
Right. And if it is amicable and quick, you were mentioning, we spoke earlier that it can be done online now, almost exclusively. Is that right?
Yes. I had
Yeah.
one where we submitted all the paperwork. My client did not even need to appear for a Zoom hearing. It was all done, they call it on the papers. And
Wow.
so we sent away the documents. And then one day in July, I opened up my email and I immediately called her and said, congratulations, you're single, you're
Wow.
divorced.
Yeah, because I bet a lot of people are just, I mean, it's overwhelming process to go through it. So having the know or knowing that it is possible to do it online as long as people are in agreement, that's great, I think.
I feel like it's
So
a reward to those people who can get out of their own way and reach a settlement agreement that, though it may not be 100% what they initially wanted, is something that they can live with, and they get the benefit of moving on with their life sooner and without spending as much money.
yeah, so it works for everybody.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah. I mean, we could be honest here and say that a contested divorce it is beneficial for a lawyer, right? You know, because
Oh,
you are going to be marking more billable hours, right? But that's not necessary, right, for everybody if we can help it, right?
I feel like I would rather do 200 amicable uncontested divorces a year than 20 contested divorces a year. And it's
Sure.
the same amount of hours, but I get to help more people. Um, and quite honestly, if you bring the temperature down, it's not
Sure.
a fun experience to be fighting over which person gets which commemorative bobblehead doll. Like that was not what I dreamed about when I went to law
Yeah.
school.
I imagine that does happen in some cases, huh? People are, yeah,
Yes. We
I could
fought
see.
over waffle makers, pool tables,
Wow.
commemorative bobblehead dolls. And then, of course, everybody's seen the picture online of the couple splitting up their beanie babies in court. Everyone has seen that viral image.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that. I have to look at that. That's funny. I
Oh, I'll
mean,
have to pass that one along to you.
yeah, so I have questions here that are real questions from real people. So if we want to go into some of them, this might be useful for some people that are on the verge or thinking about or curious, or hopefully this is just informational and yeah. So I'll just jump into it. So um what do you do when your spouse doesn't want a divorce, but you do?
You go get a divorce. I mean,
You just
here's the thing.
file.
In Yeah, in New Jersey, actually, I would say time out on the filing. We don't
Hmm.
like really, at least that's where I work. We don't like rush into filing, and that's kind of been my philosophy for years now. I feel like the moment someone says you've been served, it's like throwing a cat in a bubble bath. Like the back comes up and the claws come out,
Yeah.
right? So when someone says, "Okay, my spouse doesn't want divorce," I'm sorry, but it's the year 2023, right? And we're in New Jersey, and it's a no fault divorce state. Like you still have to have a reason for divorcing, but New Jersey gives you the irreconcilable differences, and it doesn't need
Mm,
to be irreconcilable on both sides. It just needs to be
yeah.
in your mind. It's irreconcilable, right?
Yeah.
So the other person doesn't want it, but also like who wants to be in a marriage where like the other person's checked out? I don't really think that's anybody's goal,
Yeah.
you know.
Based on the numbers, it doesn't seem like people are able to put up with it, for a long period of time. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's it's good to know. And
Yeah.
now moving along, so what do I do when my parents don't support my divorce? I know some of these are philosophical.
Oh, well, my solution to this one would be to have your spouse move in with them. That way you can do a trial separation and see how much they get along with him or her.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. So then you don't
it's
have to argue with
really,
them.
and I get it. There's like cultural differences and times are different. I mean, some of us still can think back to the time where we like used to go home for lunch from grade school and like a parent was there during the day. I mean, times
Yeah.
are different. Like we're all working full-time jobs. We're schlepping the kids around to their activities. And your parents really don't know, or probably shouldn't know, what's going on really behind closed doors. So you may have to have a really frank conversation with them about here's what's going on. My
Yeah.
spouse doesn't talk to me nice in front of the kids, and I want your grandchildren to understand what a respectful, loving relationship is. I don't want your granddaughter to believe that the way her father talks to me is somehow in some way going to be the way that her future spouse talks to her, and putting it in perspective for them and saying, mom, dad, like you guys have worked it out. It wasn't always peaches and cream, but dad, you have never talked to mom the way that my spouse talks to me.
Sure.
Or it just may be that you're not in love anymore and you're not finding fulfillment anymore. And it may be for the kids' best interest to be in separate houses, loved by both of their parents, but just not under the same roof. And so it may be a difficult conversation, but ultimately, it's your life. You only get one spin down here.
Hmm.
And, um, and, your
Yeah, and they don't
parents should
know,
be.
your parents don't necessarily know what's happening. They just want the tradition or the image or the family unit, and they're not in the thick of it, so to speak, right?
And they
Yeah.
also may have like an antiquated picture of what divorce looks like.
Yeah,
They may not be aware that there's amicable routes and that, you know, I've
sure.
gotten someone divorced in 8 days before. So it doesn't need to be a really long,
Yeah.
drawn out process. Maybe you and your spouse already know what you want to do. You want to do 50-50 custody, you're each going to equally see the kids. And maybe the grandparents will be reassured knowing that's a respectful breakup. It's not, all vile and venom.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's I just think yeah, people are just very I think it has a lot to do with religion if we look at it. The most religious countries and the most religious folks are the ones that kind of compelled by themselves or their folks or their faith or whatever to just stick it out no matter what, regardless. Or unfortunately, they're forced to. So in some cases,
Some people feel culturally pressured to marry. And so, in sticking
hmm
with their cultural preferences and ultimately sometimes satisfying their parents' needs, wants, and desires, they have this awakening, usually in like their 30s or 40s, where they say, what am I doing? Like, I've checked off all the boxes for my parents, and I've checked off none of the boxes for myself. I've gotten
yeah,
married, I've done the traditional wedding, I've given them a grandson and a granddaughter, and we have dogs and we have a house, and I'm miserable.
sure. It's like the process of getting married is fun, and being married in the beginning is fun, but long term, it's a different story for a lot of people. It seems like because it seems like everybody wants to get married, right? And the process of getting married is fun. At least that's
I
what it
mean,
seems like.
I'm obviously
We're in
very
different
tainted in this
demographics, let's
regard
be fair.
because I mean, yeah, being a divorce lawyer, I was not super eager to get married.
Oh, of course, yeah. You've seen it from
I
both
had like
sides.
this how they have like the red flags that you look for? Like my red flag book is like
So
30 pages
long.
long.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, maybe off script here, but like, what
Yeah.
would you say, uh, to someone who wants to stay out of your office, that maybe wants to, um, any tips, from your years of experience? Because you've been a lawyer for what, at least a decade or more, or
Yeah. So
close?
I essentially have been working in the realm of family law for 13 years now, and I've been practicing family law for 12 as an attorney, having done a 1 year clerkship at the inception. And I've now been married for 8 years.
Mm,
So my recommendation is like when you think back to the early days of dating, like, you were leaving work early, you're going in late, you're doing date night, you were
yeah,
leaving little cards and doing nice
yeah,
things. Like, continue to date your spouse.
sure. I've heard that
Um,
before.
it's not easy when you've got like toddlers and you're barely managing to like wash your hair and get the
Yeah,
kids to and their lunch boxes ready. But carve out that time if you can. Even if you don't have any relatives nearby, like match up with another mom from pre-K and do a swap. Like you guys can have the kids sleep, like the other classmates sleep over your house one night and then pawn your kids off them another night. Like, but just go out and pretend to date again. It's so important. And one
yeah,
of the other things that I hear again and again and again is I don't feel appreciated. I do X, Y, and Z, and he or she takes it completely for granted. So at the end of the day, think about like, what was it that your spouse did today that made your life even like 10% easier?
mm,
And say, thank you for that. I forget when like recycling and trash day is because I never have to think about it. And so I say, thank you for taking that mental load off me. That's one
yeah,
less thing on my plate. It's not super romantic to like, wow, you took out the trash and recycling,
yeah.
but I appreciate it, you know?
So your husband will just he takes the trash out. You don't have to ask him. It's just always taken care of, basically.
Yeah.
Just little
Like,
things
and
like that.
there's like an almond milk fairy that comes to my house. It's never empty.
That's so funny you
And
mentioned
that's,
that.
it's such a small thing, but it's just like, can you imagine you're going in, you're ready to, make your smoothie for the morning, and then it's like down to a
hmm
millimeter. I don't have to worry about that because that's one thing he'll take care of. And I'll say, I appreciate you for doing that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
just like little things like that.
yeah. Keep dating. Keep going out. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure there's little things that you do for your husband as well, that he doesn't really ask for, and he probably feels loved with
Uh,
those things. Yeah,
Absolutely. Cuban coffee every morning, ready in the pot. So when he wakes
nice.
up, it's there.
There you go. I've heard, it's funny you say that because I've heard that elsewhere. It's just the little things. And then of course I've heard continuing to date your spouse, but you know, because I guess if you just keep getting wrapped up, you get farther and farther apart. You become more and more roommates. It's like you're like coworkers almost, and coworkers don't always get along, so it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily help. And I've heard the rose-colored glasses theory too. How do you feel about that? Like you got to treat your spouse almost like a special. Like, you don't treat them like a friend. You don't treat them like anything else other than like this special, unique uh, person. With those
So I always
glasses
think
on.
of the spouse as being like the top of the top level of a friend. Like the only way you end up a spouse is because you've reached the highest capacity of the friend level. So
Hmm.
the elevated friend. But there's got to be, all that other stuff there too. And the thing about being a spouse is sometimes there's things going on in your head and they might be like negative or positive, but I'm finding more that whenever you question, like, should I tell this person this? Or the answer is yes, because ultimately you want them to understand what it is like you're thinking or going through or worried about. And so then you're not confiding in someone else and
Yeah.
treating that, giving that other person your kind of like insider scoop. And when people talk about having like work wives or work husbands, I get
Yeah.
a little concerned about
It's like
that because I'm
they
like,
like joke about it, but it's like not
mm-hmm,
really a joke, right? Kind of in some cases.
no, far too many times that goes really awfully and
Yeah. And social
mixing
media,
business with pleasure.
I know
Oh, yes.
before social media, before 2000, I don't know, around 2008 and things like even before then, it was like you interacted with who you interacted with on a daily basis. There was no like potentially, other mate options in your pocket on your phone. So obviously that's had a massive impact. How many times have you worked with clients that cited that were they were cheating, or their husband or their wife were cheating on the, dating apps or whatever? I'm sure it's rampant at this point.
And the thing is that, for those of us who were in school at the time, like when Facebook was out and MySpace was out, it's just always been part of our lives. But you have this whole other generation who suddenly was able to connect with the one
Mm,
that got away,
hmm.
suddenly was able to find, their high school sweetheart that had fallen off the face of the planet or their middle school crush. And, that rushes back all those emotions and feelings of that time. But most of it's like a fallacy. Like these people aren't perfect. And
Right,
I've just seen so many people throw away their relationships on the hope that this person
right.
out in
It's gonna be better.
Kentucky, yeah,
Yeah, what is
uh,
it that I heard? Everybody is a mess up close, right? Let's say, and as an example, you're a married man and you see this beautiful woman in the grocery store and you think, wow, if only, right? But the reality is everybody's got their um, downsides or ugliness, if you will, up close. So let's say you get to know her and and you date her. There's always going to be something, but for whatever reason, our brains trick ourselves into thinking it's going to be better or somehow going to be they're not going to have the same issues or whatever the case. So seems like,
my phrase here is find somebody whose shit doesn't trigger your shit. We all have shit. We
yeah,
all have shit. Maybe like you've been cheated on before, right? So you have trust issues.
yeah,
You need that partner who is accountable, who is like, I just got on the plane, I just landed, good night.
I
I'm on
see.
a business trip. Good night. I miss you, love you, that type of thing. Like you can't have radio silence if you are a person who's been cheated on
Fair,
and
yeah.
has trust issues. Similarly, if you were in a very super controlling relationship and that didn't work for you, that's your shit. You don't want to be controlled. If you find somebody who wants to monitor every moment of your day, going to be a problem. So be honest about what your shit is, and then find somebody who doesn't trigger it.
Fair enough. Yeah, because you're yeah. Um, I wasn't sure what I was gonna say actually after that, but that makes sense. I mean, ultimately, I guess you find out. Do you recommend? I mean, and we're going off tangent here, but do you recommend living together first or after, after you get married? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I absolutely think that you should, at a minimum, spend like multiple nights per week with the other
Sure.
person. Even if you don't, consolidate households until you get married, right? You need to know if that person has these like little things that might be problematic. Like I know
Yeah.
I drive my husband nuts. I do not put the top back on the toothpaste. I don't. And but like that wasn't a deal breaker for him, so we proceeded on. But there are so many people who like, maybe they were tidying up when you came every weekend to go
Right.
date. But all of a sudden you get to their house on a Tuesday and you realize it looks like it was ransacked,
Right.
that type of thing. Or is this the type of person that's going to leave a milliliter of almond milk in the container so that
Right.
there's nothing
Oh
left for
man, I
you?
do that. I do that. I don't know why. It's like I have to leave a little bit in there for some reason. I don't know
Yeah.
why. I don't know, but I do it. And yeah, it is annoying for her. So, but she
And
knows,
I would
she's
also
aware.
say, like, if you have kids, I'm a firm believer of waiting for a while before your kids meet your new significant other. The judge I clerked for, we called it the Baker Rule. The Baker Rule was minimum 6 months of monogamy. I was like, I'll take your 6 months, I'll raise you. So for me, it was like 11 months before I met his kid. And
Oh wow.
if you are thinking about getting married, you absolutely need to understand what that dynamic looks like on a day-to-day basis, and to understand what, if any, is going to be your role in that.
Sure.
Are you
And if you're very
cooking? Are you?
comfortable with
Mhm.
your partner, it comes off as much more natural when you meet their kids, right? So just allow for is that what you were getting at, or did I miss
No, just meaning like you want to be able to understand what that looks like, so that
your
not only are
role?
you not getting used to being married as a whole, but you're now also sharing your space and your time with another little person.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah,
Like what's
this
their bedtime routine? Like, does this kid not eat fish sticks? Does he have to eat by 7? Are you gonna have any responsibilities for like homework monitoring or lawn? What's going to be
yeah.
the
What are
division
you
of
signing up
labor?
for? Yeah. What
Mm-hmm.
sacrifices will you be making? Got to find that
Yes.
out ahead of time so you're not
Yes.
surprised. Is that that's what you're getting at, eh?
Yes. Because some people
Yeah.
completely think that it's going to be like, oh, I mean, it's all rainbows and butterflies. And it's like, my goal was like,
Yeah,
if this kid can merely tolerate my existence under the same roof, I'm winning.
sure. Yeah, I've heard that I've heard that the Institute of Marriage been referred to. I've heard it referred to as an outdated technology because the idea is that when it was created, it was because folks didn't live that long. They lived for 40 up till they were 40 years old.
Mhm.
And that we had, people had to make sure that property and assets were transferred to the rightful people, in that family. Um, do you think, I mean, everyone believes so fervently that that's what they should do is get married, but yet it is an old thing that has, persisted. And do you think it might be outdated, or what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any?
So I think that as a whole, and I'm speaking for females because I really don't understand the way the male works most of the time. I'll be honest.
Sure, sure.
Um, that being said, I mean, from the divorce perspective, I completely understand what guys want, and I will fight for their rights and understand where they're coming from. But as far as like the marriage perspective for man, I don't necessarily fully understand that. But for me, I'm hoping that we can get away from the notion of women should do this by this age. because what
Right.
ends up happening is we have this like imaginary time frame. We're like, oh my gosh, I need to at least have like two kids by the time I'm in my mid 30s. So then you start
Right.
counting back, right? So I need to, if I want to have two kids, then I need to at least start. I want to be married for 2 years before I have kids. So now you go 35 minus one. Okay, so that's 34, that's 33. So I need to be married by the time I'm 30 in order for this plan to work out. And if I need to be married by 30, I really at least want like a 2 year engagement for that. So you're at 28, and I need to be dating that person for 2 years, then you're at 26. And then so when you're at 25, you have this feeling that like the next one I meet has got to be it because that fits into my time frame. And then you get to
Yeah.
27 and you're like, well, I guess if I meet somebody now, then maybe we're like super in love and we could just get married in Vegas. And before you know it, you're 31 and you think that you have failed at everything that has
I
been
see.
on your to do list. If your to do list is completely focused on marriage and kids.
Right.
But if you're me and you're in law school at the time you're 30, like all of
Yeah.
those things are like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. Like it will happen when it happens, if it happens at all.
Mm.
And so I think I'm seeing like a greater number of people say, if it happens, it happens. If not,
So
I'm going to
don't
Greece.
worry too much about time frame. I mean, I from the I guess the guy's perspective, I'm just as if I'm observing women, it seems that they are concerned with their time frame of having kids, right? Obviously, I mean that's the big issue, which is I do because it seems like people, maybe I'm generalizing, but a lot of folks, especially nowadays, it's really tough. It's expensive. There's inflation. Having kids is a huge deal, right? But especially for a woman, she has to she a lot of girls, it seems like they are not wanting to have kids. There we go. I found my words. They're not really wanting to have kids at all, but ultimately at the end of the day, they do. And even guys do. They say they don't, but guys and girls both. They say they don't want kids, but ultimately they do. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think that kind of ties back to your prior conversation about cultural and family influences. And how many Thanksgiving dinners are you in where like great Aunt Lucy keeps on asking when you're going to continue the family line and
Yep.
is your family name going to die? And there's these like subtle pushes there. The other thing that you said that was really interesting was, they decide that maybe they do or maybe they don't have kids. But I am also of the firm belief before you decide to have kids, please, please, if you can, consider how the person you've chosen as a spouse is going to be as a parent. Like if they don't want to be a parent,
Sure.
you and they've made it known as such, it's going to be a real uphill battle when you have two and one is in travel soccer and the other is in hockey. And one
Yeah.
of you is going to be taking the kid to hockey at 5:30 in the morning and wearing a parka, even if it's July. And the other one of you is going to be spending every weekend going to soccer tournaments, and you're going to be two ships passing, isn't it? Are you strong enough to deal with that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have kids, so this is very informational for just me. But I assume folks are like I'm 33, so I assume just not let alone kids, just owning a house, buying property, being financially stable, all of that stuff is adding on to the difficulty.
But from the beginning, we kind of came to this as like, well, I think when you have a child with another person, there's two different approaches. You can either do, they call it parallel parenting or co-parenting. Co-parenting is was like you incorporate and you work together on every single issue that that kid does. And another one is parallel parenting, which is I do what's best for the kid at my house. I'm not trying to micromanage her. She does what's best for the kid at her house. And we just all keep our eye on the prize. So we've taken like a very team approach, which is, you have three involved, informed, caring people, two of them being biological parents, one being a step parent. And
Yeah.
as long as we're all focused on like what the kid's best interest is, everything will work out okay. And it's worked.
Yeah. I'm
So we
always
go for a very
amazed.
team approach.
Yeah, I'm always amazed by step parents like willingness to do that stuff because I mean, I was raised from 1 years old by a stepfather, and he's basically, I mean, I don't even really think of him as a stepfather. He's my dad, but he was willing to do that, which is great. I mean, I think, yeah, I owe a lot to him. So, but anyhow,
Well,
okay. So yeah, so before I jump into these questions, there was one thing I was curious about, which was prenuptial agreements.
Mhm.
Do you do those, right?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Yes. Do you recommend them?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I know that every attorney right now is like cringing, like, what do you mean sometimes? Like, I didn't have a prenup. Like, I didn't. And I'm completely honest about it. Like, I had more debt than assets. So
Mm,
my husband was marrying into six-figure law school debt. Like, if you want to go on this journey with me, like we're in it together, right?
got
And
it. It's a
someday we
leap
can
of
probably
faith.
pull this video as evidence in the future divorce hearing or whatever, but we're not going to. Look, if you have if you have assets, if you have a house already, if you have bank accounts, if you have, oh God, an inheritance that you have,
Mm, mhm.
you want to be really, really clear in writing about how that's going to be treated. Let me give you a great example. I had a case where someone had an inheritance and it's sitting in an account. And that person also inherited a house. But they've now like taken a home equity line of credit, got a pool put on, right? They want to make sure that the house that they inherited is never ever subject to equitable distribution, which is the division of assets and debts in a divorce. And so they've carved it out where they say, my asset is going to remain my asset regardless of what we do to it during our marriage. So if we decide we want to gut this and add in a movie theater, we want to put in travertine floors, whatever else, even if I use my earnings while I'm married to fix up this premarital inherited asset, it's still going to be mine. He agrees he's not going to have any claim, any interest in this house, even though my marital earnings went into fixing it up.
Mm,
This is where it gets so complicated because, you in a marriage, somebody could pass away and you get an inheritance. The biggest mistake people make is then putting that into the joint account
sure. Sure.
because now it's all mixed up. We call it commingled. Your
Right.
great Aunt Nancy passes away, put that in a TD bank account over here, leave it there.
Yeah. It's kind of like buying a really big, fancy, expensive TV and you both paid half for it, but like, who gets the TV?
Mhm.
That's fair. So there's something to be said for like, hey, maybe I'll take this. Like, even as you're going along in your marriage, just say, this will be in my name, this will be in your name, and that's fine. We can talk about it,
Oh
you know.
gosh. But that doesn't count either. That
Well,
doesn't
if
count
you don't
either.
have the
So,
prenup, right?
right. So the biggest thing I'll get is, well, I mean, it's my retirement account. It's my name and it came out of my paycheck. And I'll say, well, do you have a prenup? No. Were
Yeah.
you married when this happened? Yes. So it's a marital asset, but she didn't contribute anything to it, but she did, right?
Yep.
Otherwise, those
Yep.
funds that you would have contributed would have gone into the household budget. So kind of like siphoned funds from the household budget. But in so many cases, wife is over here, she has her 401k, other spouses over here, they have an IRA. We look at the assets in New Jersey from date of marriage to date of complaint, or date of marriage until date of you reaching some sort of agreement. And you say, The other spouse is entitled to a part of this, only the marital part. We call that marital coverture share. So anything premarital doesn't count. Anything after your date of complaint or post agreement doesn't count. So you have a police officer. He has a 25-year career. The first 10 years, he's a single guy out there. Those 10 years, nobody touches those. Those are just his. Then he's married for 10 years. That 10-year marital coverture part, that would be subject to equitable distribution. And then he has 5 more years at the tail end before he gets to retire. So essentially, wife would be looking at that 5 over this 10. That's it. But you instead say that it's the numerator is the total years of marriage, and the denominator is the total years of the entire pension plan. And she's entitled to 1/2 of the marital coverture. So essentially like 2.5 out of 25. No, 5. Yeah, 5 at the top over 25. So not very much. Not very much at all.
So
a lot of times, like I said, we try to strive for like offsets. So you have a teacher's pension over here, you have, a police officer's pension over here, probably very similar. We can easily get those appraised by an actuary and figure out what we're doing there. But like, kind of circling back to your initial question, was like prenup. Yeah, some people do opt to get them, but I think it's really important when you have something that you already have in mind that you want to preserve. One thing that is really just a bad idea in a prenup is having someone say like waive support. And I've had people come in and talk to me and they're like, he wants me to agree to not ever seek alimony.
Of course.
Okay, but you're 21 and you guys are already talking about having kids. So at the point where you've stayed at home for 16 years and you've been the one taking the kids to soccer and he's been, building a multi-million-dollar business, like I really don't want to see anyone strip themselves of any rights that may not seem super important now when you're 21, but when you're 40 and you didn't, end up finishing your college degree because you stayed home with the kids and you're trying to figure out where you're going to work, it becomes a lot more relevant.
That just doesn't seem fair, right? Because the deck is a little stacked. I mean, there has to be some value to her if it doesn't work out, especially if she didn't develop her own incomes or careers, right? Which nowadays seems like less and less, but seems like,
flip it and reverse it. I mean, I have represented men before who were the stay-at-home parent and fought tooth and nail to get them alimony. And said, what does it matter if his name is Chris as opposed to Chrissy?
Right.
What does it matter if his name is Mike instead of Michelle?
For sure.
It doesn't matter. He was the one loading the dishwasher. He was the one taking the kids to pediatrician appointments. And she was off on business trips. And we have to make sure that he's able to survive and have a place. So prenups can have like positives and benefits. Unfortunately, New Jersey does have a rule that says that you have to have each person have the prenup reviewed by an independent attorney representing that. So hopefully 21-year-old doesn't get bamboozled into waiving alimony because she's had the opportunity to consult with her own.
Sure. So if you do want to get a prenup in New Jersey, you need to seek your own individual lawyer for you and hers for hers, his for his. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that
and
a
if
requirement?
She, after
otherwise,
speaking with me, still decides, no, Kristin, that's fine. Thank you for your guidance. I'm still going to sign this though, then that's on her, right?
Gotcha.
Because I can only give the advice, but she's going to have to decide what works for her. The courts, however, will occasionally be challenged to say, maybe this prenup's invalid. You're going to say, oh my gosh, Kristin, there's always so many examples of like exceptions to the rule? Yes, there are. So if someone is handed a prenup like 2 days before the wedding and they have to run and find an attorney really quickly to review it with them, meanwhile, the flower person's already been paid, the hall's already been paid, you already have your $10,000 dress, you already have your limo, you already have this, your families already flying in from across the country.
So you're springing
That
it
could be
on them.
considered duress. You were
Sure.
forced and put in a bad position. Like, sign this or the wedding's off. Court's never going to be happy to hear about that.
Interesting. So you got to give somebody ample opportunity to understand. Otherwise, it could be invalidated.
Yeah, it only hurts you. Like, if you're going to put somebody in that bad position, like a couple days before, it's probably going to come back and bite that person about.
Yeah, for sure. I remember one example. I think it was a famous basketball player, and he asked the gal he was going to marry to sign it, and she broke down. She was crying, and he's just like, "Oh, if she won't sign it, I guess we're not getting married." But that seemed like it was a little sprung on her. But yeah, I think maybe it was being postponed and postponed, but I don't know. If you, like you say, if you have a ton of assets here that you created, you gathered, it makes sense, especially for a famous basketball player, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially since, there may be endorsement deals that come in the future. He may have future earnings and assets that come about because of his premarital persona. I think I was like
Oh,
the exception. I really was more, I had more debts than assets. So I was like, this doesn't make any sense for me. But if each person is coming in with, a house, a car, and maybe other children, they also want to have deep considerations for how that may impact their estate. So if they have other kids, they might say, this house that I inherited, I intend for this to go to my biological children. I don't want someone else to have a claim to that house. So that's like also an intersection of estate law. And I would refer, clients to an estate lawyer so that they could get all of those items in a row, make sure that their will is really clear about what happens with those things. But also be sure that the prenup says this premarital inherited house is mine, and it is not in any way, shape, or form going to be subject to equitable distribution in the divorce.
sure.
But it
Yeah.
is super unromantic.
I noticed the way you were kind of speaking about the prenup. I think a lot of people share that view of like, oh, but that's just, that's just not romantic. I don't know if I want
Yeah.
to do that. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to have that conversation. But it seems pretty important for some people. Like maybe they
If
should.
yeah,
Maybe they
if
should
you're
talk about it.
questioning having that conversation, you probably should have that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. Well, awesome. Well, yeah. So what I've heard is the most simple prenup that you can get is what's in my name is in my name, what's in your name is in your name. You get to keep that. And anything we deem as joint will be split 50-50 upon divorce. Is that pretty accurate in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you could just say, like, whatever we acquire during the marriage that's not attached to either of these two things, then we'll just deal with in a future way. Or you can say, yeah, anything we get from the date we marry moving forward, we just agree to split 50-50,
Oh, that's
regardless of whoever's
yeah,
name it's in. Or, anything that's in my name will stay my name. Anything that's in her name will stay her name. And anything that, you know, anything that's jointly held, we divide 50-50. Or you could just say anything we get from the date of marriage forward gets divided in these percentages.
there's some options.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, okay, so let me jump into some of these actual questions.
Mhm.
So I think you actually covered this one pretty well, so I'll skip that one. But can now this is a real question from a real person. Can
Mhm.
I sleep with my wife during a divorce?
Yes. Yes, you can. There in New Jersey, there is no requirement that you even live physically separated and apart. You can live together up till the day you're married, the divorce. You can also live together after the divorce if you're waiting to sell a home or something like that. There's nothing on that. My question would be why?
Yeah,
Why would you want to do that? And of course, I have like this devious lawyer brain where I think, what are all the bad things that could happen from it? And you might think, hey, better to go with the person I know than someone I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
But
Because
do
maybe
you trust
the
this person? Do you trust this person?
yeah,
Do you trust this person? Because The last thing you need on top of a divorce is a false claim of sexual assault, a restraining order against you. You're now kicked out of the home and she has your DNA.
Yeah.
And now you're dealing with a divorce hearing at the same time you're dealing with
Yeah.
aggravated assault, sexual battery. It just could be a mess. And
Sure.
so
So
think
maybe not the
carefully
best
about that.
idea. I know I was surprised at how popular that question was, but it makes sense. It's you're familiar with the person and perhaps your romance wasn't the issue. Maybe it was some other things that were the issue, right?
Absolutely.
So, um, so what must I do when my husband left me but won't divorce me?
He left you but won't divorce you. Go get divorced. File for divorce. Okay. And I said before, Logan, that my belief is that we should first try to see if we can resolve it before filing.
Mhm.
So a lot of times in that circumstance, I'll sit down with that spouse and I'll say, what would it look like upon divorce? Do you have kids? What do you want that custody to look like? Do you have assets? How do you want to divide them? And we put together a comprehensive written proposal and we send that out and we say, hey, guess what? Oh, you heard? She already wants a divorce. Okay, here's our proposal. If you like it, sign it, have it notarized, return it back to us. We can save time, we can save money, right? If you ignore me, I'm having a process server come and serve you, and we're going to get started with the divorce. If he signs the agreement, you're on the fast path to divorce. And if he doesn't sign it, then we file for divorce anyway. We then get him
Mm,
served. He has 35 days to respond. The 36th day, he hasn't responded. I move to enter default against that person. That tells the court, hey, this guy, not interested, does not wish to participate.
mm,
Let's go. Big misnomer. Like you see on TV, like, oh, he wouldn't sign the paper. Doesn't matter if he doesn't sign the papers because we still
mm.
move on. New Jersey will still allow you to get divorced. I've had people who like they just completely ignore all the stuff I send them.
Sure.
They'll move on.
But the
At the point where,
process goes
yeah, at the
on.
point where we tell them, like the court, this person's not interested, let's move on. The court has another procedure that we go through. And at the end of that procedure, we have a hearing with just me and my client and the judge. The other side doesn't even need to show up. And at the end of that hearing, the judge enters a judgment of divorce and we'll consider all the evidence we put forward and we'll make a decision as to how to divide up stuff. And
Mm,
many times it's exactly what we asked for because it's unopposed. And other times the judge may even do something more generous than what I asked for.
because they're MIA. They're not participating. So
The court's
really
not going to hold you hostage to somebody who can't even be bothered to respond to like a letter or an email.
interesting. So this question, the answer really is just like that your husband can't really stop you
Mhm.
from getting divorced. Yeah. The way these questions are, asked are may seem a bit obvious, but yeah, that's yeah. Okay. So really, ultimately, the show will go on if you want to, or if
Absolutely.
you need to. Got it. And and I think you answered this earlier, but can you divorce your wife for not sleeping with you? I think the answer is yes.
Technically, yes. Irreconcilable differences is a cause of action in the state of New Jersey. You have to state that there have been differences between you that have caused the breakdown of the marriage, that they exist to the present. It makes it no longer reasonable to live together as husband and wife, and your marriage is irretrievably broken at that point. And
Mm,
so if you want to have sex with your partner and they don't want to have sex with you, and that happens for 6 months, and
mm,
that in and of itself is enough for you to say, I'm done, then the court's going to take you at your word. Those differences are irreconcilable to you,
right.
and you can
So
file for divorce.
6 months is kind of wow.
But the same thing could go, which is that I don't like the way that this person doesn't put the top on the toothpaste for 6 months and it's driving me nuts. It could be little things. It just could be, I don't really love this person anymore.
Sure.
It used to be that you'd have to prove the reason why to the judge and you'd have to come up with it. And Eventually they had such a backlog of divorce. This was a couple decades ago, that they said, you know what? We honestly don't care. If you guys just don't like each other anymore, we're still cool with processing your divorce.
Gotcha. Yeah, I wonder if there are states where it's difficult to get divorced. I'm sure there are. Or like maybe that you do have to prove more so that there's
Yeah.
irreconcilable differences. But New Jersey is not one of them.
New Jersey used to have, they called it extreme cruelty.
Hmm.
And so you'd have to bring forth evidence or testify as to the things that your spouse did that were extremely cruel or hurtful or harmful to you.
Wow.
And so many times it's like the harm is in the eye of the beholder, I guess. What one person finds to be extremely cruel, another person's like, that didn't bother me at all.
Yeah. So this one's kind of divisive, but how do I strategically divorce my wife without paying her half?
So one thing I had considered about this question is the person says without paying her half. Well, if you're worried about having to like cut a check, then perhaps the option is offsetting certain assets. You know, we think about the house is worth $400,000. It's encumbered by a mortgage of 100,000. The equity value in that house is 300. Her half is 150. But maybe instead she keeps the RV that's paid off in full. She keeps the Disney Vacation Club timeshare. She
Mm,
keeps the little condo in Ocean City, and she keeps her 401k, and you keep the house, 100% of the house. Essentially, you found an offset, and you're not cutting a check to the person to buy them out of that house.
got it.
That's one
So
potential there.
that makes sense. So if this person that was asking this question meant actual physical cash being sent, then that might be a good alternative or a good way
Mhm.
to go about it.
Yeah.
Okay. And this one, why does my husband want me to file for divorce first?
Your husband found out that the person who files first pays more. When you file the complaint for divorce, the cost of that is more than filing an answer and counterclaim. Also,
Mhm.
when you file your complaint for divorce, if the other spouse files an answer and counterclaim, then you have to file an answer to counterclaim. So you pay not one, but two filing fees. So perhaps that's one reason why your spouse wants you to go first, because he or she's cheap. The other option is maybe there's this mental load that they want to hoist upon you so that they can walk around and say, she filed for divorce or he filed for divorce. I didn't want it. And then they get to be all holier than thou and oh,
Right.
boo hoo hoo, everybody feels sorry for me.
That's a good
There's been a
point. It's
lot of,
reputation preservation, perhaps, rather than reputation destruction. It's reputation preservation. Because, yeah, I mean, imagine how many friends and this and that, because it is an awkward situation when you get divorced, right? For a lot of like socially. And yeah, so just being able to say, oh, well, she ended up doing it. It's like, oh, it's such a scapegoat, right?
right. And I would say, like, in truly like narcissistic relationships, which the N word is thrown around a lot in divorce,
Yeah.
sometimes that can be like a power play, which is, I didn't really want this. And if you want this, then you're going to have to go do it. And so
Hmm.
that's part of that like gaslighting, like, well, do I really want it? Do I want to be the one who makes the first step? And it can be like psychological warfare. So,
Yeah.
you know, it can be a game played, but it also can come down to, I wanted to save like $100.
That's I mean that's kind of
Flip it and
funny.
reverse it though. I've been asked so many times, like, what's the benefit to filing first? To which I'd say the benefits of filing first is that the stopwatch stops. Because from the date of marriage until the
Right.
date of complaint for divorce, we're talking marital assets and debts. After that stopwatch, you know, if you're now in post date of complaint land, you
Sure.
might want to stop the bleeding.
Fair. Okay, I see. Or maybe it's that if you think that they might not be compliant, maybe you should get the ball rolling, because at some point, like you mentioned earlier, they're gonna have to either play or
Right.
get screwed,
Yeah.
really. So,
If you think about it, like the date that you file, your very next paycheck, you have more money going to your 401k
mhm.
or your HSA. And you do that week after week after week after week.
Oh, I see.
And after 10 weeks, your 401k has more money in it. Your HSA has more money in it.
I see what you're saying by stop the bleeding. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
this is going to be split if I don't stop now. If it goes on for another year, how much money is that? How many? Yeah, that makes a
Yes.
lot of
Yeah.
sense. Got it. So if maybe you're I guess maybe if you're the top earner in the relationship, you would be more incentivized to get it taken care of quicker, right?
Yes. And that to be said, like if you want to engage in, say, a mediation process to try and resolve things on the onset, you can say, we are electing to choose today, the date of our first meeting or whatever it is, as the date for the stop of the watch. Where we're going to say from this point forward,
Hmm.
anything that we invest or earn, right, that's going to be separate. That's going to be out of the marital pot. Because mediation can take 4 weeks, it could take 4 months, it could take 6 months. You don't want to feel like you're going to be penalized for that amount of time that you're working in earnest to reach a resolution. So sometimes people will say, well, we continue to work on this, but that doesn't mean that everything I'm investing for the next 4 months is or any bonuses I get, any stock options I'm provided during this next 4 months might be available to you. So that there would have to be like an understanding reached in mediation. But that is why I think a lot of people, they will file. They want that clock to stop. They want to ensure that any time it takes to get this resolved, they are no longer contributing to the marital pot with those retirement contributions and
Sure.
things like that.
That makes sense. I get what you mean now. And this was one question that kind of came up as you were talking, because mediation, uh, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know, what is the difference between mediation versus just, where does mediation come into play? Because I have seen that a lot. How's that different from just filing for divorce?
Okay, so in mediation, you actually have a neutral third party.
Got
And
it.
so if I'm your mediator, that means I don't represent you, Logan, but I also don't represent your spouse. I'm a neutral and I'm
Oh,
working with the two of you to help you reach an agreement that each of you may find acceptable to resolve the differences in your matter. And at that point, Logan, you can decide whether you want to have an attorney review or even, work with you behind the scenes to decide whether what you're asking for is fair or whether, you're maybe giving up too many rights. But ultimately, people find that they're happier when they have more control and more power in the decisions. So that rather than leaving it up to like a guy in a robe with a gavel to decide what happens with your kids and your assets, maybe the two of you sit down and with the assistance of the mediator, who kind of tend to bring the temperature of the room down and
mm,
help everybody remain focused on your goals instead of digging up the past and getting angry. And we'll say,
mm,
let's talk about your kids. How old are they? How far apart are you going to live from each other? What do we want that parenting plan to look like?
mm.
Or, ma'am, your goal is to stay in the marital house. Financially, can we make this happen? And so maybe you work through what is the amount of alimony and child support that will enable one person to remain in the home with the kids. Other times you may say, there's no amount of money that either one of you have that's going to enable you to buy the other person out. It's going to be
Sure.
best, to list the house. And then a mediator can help you work through the process of, okay, well, until the home is sold, how are we dividing up the mortgage? What if the realtor says we need repairs? Who's taking responsibility for those? So
Yeah.
the mediator is a neutral third party. And if the mediator can help you reach an agreement, that mediator can reduce it to a writing called a memorandum of understanding, which is like a
Mm,
summary of all the things you agreed to. Or they can even draft a marital settlement agreement. And that marital settlement agreement, once reviewed by your attorney and signed by you, that can be attached to your complaint for divorce. That means you're in uncontested land now. All of your issues have been resolved by this one document, and you're on the fast path to divorce.
interesting. So just to be clear, so that brings up an interesting question for me personally, that I just thought of. So maybe it's obvious for other people, but can you complete a divorce with mediation by itself, or do you need to at some point hire a lawyer to complete the divorce? Like,
So that's a
yeah.
great question. I mean, we've all seen like the 3.99 divorce centers, right? On the corner. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, if you have an agreement, there are packets that you can complete and you can submit the documents on your own. However, I'll tell you, many people find that to be very overwhelming and very frustrating.
Yeah,
You know, if you miss one document, the court sends all the stuff back to you and you have to start all over again. So typically what will happen though is one person will proceed to hire an attorney just to process the paperwork and get it all put through. You know,
yeah,
otherwise you're kind of navigating the system by yourself, and that can be a little bit. Is it impossible? No. There's forms,
sure.
you fill them out, you attach the marital settlement agreement. But you know, we have an e-filing system. Most people use that. That can be challenging, and you want to make sure that
Sure.
you know, dot all your I's, cross all your T's. Don't give the court any reason to send your paperwork back to you. We want this done for you as quickly as possible, and you know
Yeah, and it
that's
is a
where I would come in.
legal binding contract that's pretty important. Maybe one of the most important legally binding contracts I've ever, done by people. So maybe just for peace of mind, you have a professional look at it.
Yeah.
That's
And you know,
interesting. It's
mediation
like,
can come in too at other points in time. Like last week, I did a Zoom mediation where I was with my client, and the other attorney was present with his attorney, and we had the neutral mediator to help our parties reach a resolution regarding summer parenting time and parenting time during the school year. It's like you say, how many lawyers in the room do you actually need? But our clients were really far apart, and we figured before we go to a trial on this matter, which is going to cost easily $10,000, let's take an afternoon and try mediation, see if it works. Collectively, these people have saved tens of thousands of dollars by not proceeding to a trial. And they both walked away with a parenting schedule that they can live with and that their kids will be happy with.
sure. I think before I likened the trying to do the divorce on your own is kind of like buying a house completely on your own.
Yeah.
Like it's just the first time you've ever, I mean, because I'm lucky enough to have bought a house, and it's yeah, doing it all by yourself is ridiculous. It's a lot.
I just think
So
if I needed to take my appendix out, I definitely would not turn to YouTube and see if I could like DIY it. I always want to
probably
go to the
not.
person who's most qualified in doing what they're doing. I mean, I've hired lawyers to represent me over the years in various things. Like I'm a lawyer and I hire lawyers because
Sure.
I don't specialize in constitutional, you know,
Right.
First Amendment rights. I don't specialize in, trademark law. And so I've hired the best people to represent me at that. I want to tell you one more option about mediation,
Okay. Go
and
for it.
that is in a case that either it's you already been litigating your divorce and you've gone to this panel called Matrimonial Early Settlement Panel, or MESP. And that panel makes a recommendation for how your divorce should settle. And about 90 some percent of those do resolve that day. If they don't resolve, the courts generally will refer you to what's called economic mediation. And there's a special list of economic mediators. I'm about to be added to that list. I just finished the final component. It's called a Rule 1:40 mediator. And it's a program through the courts. The first 2 hours of mediation are free. So the first 2 hours I'll be providing, my mediation clients will be for free. And then after that, there's just an hourly rate. The economic mediator is going to hear from the litigants and the attorneys about what the outstanding issues are, and then try to mediate those issues to help reach a resolution to prevent these people from having to go to a trial. And
Yeah.
maybe that mediator, can make some suggestions, look at the case with a different set of eyes. And essentially that's your last ditch effort to try and get it resolved. So
Gotcha.
at various stages in the game, you can do mediation up front, you can do mediation on the back end, you can do mediation in the middle. And then years later, after a divorce, you may have issues arise. You can also call upon a mediator for help then.
All right. That is a very thorough explanation. I like it because, I mean, I'll just be honest. I've heard the word mediation thrown around. I just didn't know how it came into play. Um, so interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I have. I mean, we have gone over so many good things. We have a lot to parse through.
Okay,
So yeah, I'm happy with what we've got here.
cool.
So let me ask you one last thing. So if somebody from New Jersey has questions, they're overwhelmed, maybe they're thinking about divorce, maybe whatever. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you? Yeah, where should they find you?
All right, www.gethappydivorce.com.
Okay.
And that will, open you up to an opportunity for a free consult. Otherwise, I do, substantive consult at the hourly rate. If they just want to pick my brain for an hour, we can figure out the rate for that. And
Mm,
if they want to work with me, hire me either as their divorce attorney or hire me as their mediator or hire me to draft up a marital settlement agreement. Those are all things that I'm super happy to work with people on. And yeah, I'm always going to try to be upfront, be honest, brutally honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. You deserve the truth. You deserve honesty. Um, I never want somebody to go in front of a judge and be like, "Wow, I didn't even realize that could happen," or "I didn't even realize that I had no case." Like, I'm going to tell you up front if what you're asking for is garbage.
yeah. No. So, and you're Kristen, and you pronounce your last name Liz, right?
Yep.
Kristin Lis, Lis. All right. Well, Kristen, it's been a huge pleasure to talk with you. Really appreciate your time, and that's awesome. So perfect. All
All right,
right.
Logan.
So
Thank you
that's
so much
the
for your time
recording.
today.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
I'll hit
Hello, this is post-interview Logan. If you made it this far, thank you so very, very much. We appreciate your time. And if you are in New Jersey and you are looking for advice, or you're curious, or God forbid you do need to take care of a divorce, contact Kristin Lis. She's a great gal, and you can do so at gethappydivorce.com. Alternatively, if you're a business owner, or you have a firm, or you have a company and you're looking to grow, and you're in search of a digital marketing firm that can help you do that, feel free to contact us at facelessdigital.com. My name is Logan, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much.